Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. I'm Ted, hanging out with some of the crew today.
Dave.
Nate.
And today we want to talk about the inspiration mechanic and how to use it, properly in your session. Now, if you've watched some of our gameplay videos, don't follow this guy's lead because he forgets it all the time.
Inspiration, what? My biggest problem with the inspiration mechanic is it's deeply tied to each of the characters. Their flaws, their bonds, their ideals, and their personality traits. As a DM with 7 players, that's 5 things for each player that you should be tracking. That's 35 things, right? That you should be on those 35 things. You should be awarding those players inspiration. I actually think the proper way to use inspiration in 5th edition is not use it how they intended it.
The way I do it, anytime somebody does something cool, something interesting, or totally effed up off the wall, I say boom, inspiration. Now I'm 5th edition, while we're basically at a year in at this point in time, I've had sessions where I've totally forgotten about it. There's other times I'm like, hey, that was cool, guys. Everybody's got it. Inspiration also says that it's supposed to reset at the end of a session, and there's some DMs that say, nah, you can keep it. The book also says that you're capped out at 1. You either got it or you don't. And DMs I've rolled with said, you know what, it's stackable, it's savable, use it, whatever.
Drop those 5d20 at once.
Yeah, I don't know use about it all at once, but I would agree that inspiration, I give it out at strange times, but basically, if you do something that's detrimental to your character or to the group because it makes sense for your character, not necessarily like with a flaw or whatever, or it's based on your personal knowledge rather than meta, or it's what I've seen of your character so far, it's your character, and you're playing them, and they might not be a great decision, but you made it because that's what the guy would do. If I say, hey, that's what the character would do, just from watching you play, then I'm going to give it to you. So I usually, to counteract the negative thing, it would be like taking in other games, it's like taking on a complication or something, or making the scene harder by adding something that makes sense for your character to have done. So, one of the characters was in an intense negotiation with a wizard in the bottom basement floor. Well, the ranger didn't know what was going up above, even though we were playing the combat and the negotiation at the same time. So he comes trying to bash the door down. And, the bard's got to smooth it over with the wizard, being like, oh, my companions are fighting the monstrosities upstairs. He really doesn't know that you're totally cool and calm down here. So he had to send some kind of magic message to the ranger to have him stop. But the ranger could have just been like, oh, the combat's over, so we're done now, because he's talking with the guy downstairs. So he did something that could possibly have made volatile a currently okay situation, because it was in his player's knowledge. So I automatically will give, if I recognize that, I automatically give them inspiration. And I say, hey, if you're storing up 5 inspirations, good for you. I don't reset them, because that's kind of nonsense if you think about it. Here's a reward. Make sure you use it, even if you don't need to, before the end of the game tonight. And
you're also with that whole resetting, if you do something really cool at the very end of a session, it's like, oh, well, I can't give you your inspiration because you don't have a die roll before we end it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing to use it for. You're boned.
Yeah, so resetting doesn't make sense to me, because it just basically says, hey, that cool thing you did, it doesn't matter anymore. And having it not stack is also kind of dumb for me. I just want to let you use them all at once. If you want to roll with advantage for the next 5 combats, go right ahead. You got 5 rolls, so
right.
What? And then you're back down to 0. So you better do something cool again if you want to get any more inspiration. So I don't really see it impacting.
I kind of feel
crits and fumbles impact the game more than inspiration does, as far as I'm concerned.
I feel like the important thing is kind of to kind of re-envision inspiration from the way Wizards of the Coast kind of put it out in this version of the game, and figure out how it's going to be most fun in your game. I know there's absolutely tons of GMs and DMs out there. They just hate any kind of Benny system in general. So maybe they just rip it right out of the game altogether. But for you guys that want to use it, you got to figure out what's going to be the most fun for you. Is allowing it to stack going to be fun? Is carrying over going to be fun? Are you going to be stingy like me and barely ever give inspiration? I may, I either have to start make a note to myself that I can look at, that'll always be in my face, or I may just like designate different players at different times, be like, you're the inspiration giver. Do a job of giving the inspiration, I will give it to you.
Well, I know, I look as a player, I will be an advocate for any player at the table but myself. I'm not going to sit back and say, hey man, I think what I did was really cool. Shouldn't I get inspiration for that? And I know that, over the months of playing, I have done it. Multiple times. I'm like, dude, inspiration right there. And usually if I speak up, the DM sits back and says, yeah, that's worth it. So if you're a player at the table, as long as you're not being a jackhole about it, yeah, vie for your fellow players, because ultimately it's going to benefit you as well, because it only helps out the group as a whole, unless you're, doing lots of PvP, and well, that's a whole nother case.
I would say that, I think that's kind of weird, reminding the DM for inspiration.
But
but I think it's also for someone who's not used to doing it.
If it's
it
a
might
DM
be a
like Dave
necessity.
who's not giving it out, then yes, absolutely, you wanna remind them. And
But I want to be really sure that I was like, yeah, that person should definitely get inspiration. There's
Well,
not really
that's
any
the
doubt.
other key. It's like, did they really do something cool, or did they just play? There's definitely things in the game that you can do that I don't know if you need the extra reward for. So if there's a puzzle and you figure it out, does that really require inspiration just because you figured it out? I'm more inclined to give it for really cool role-playing scenes than I am for, just because you accomplished something.
A recent example of it's difficult to do inspiration as the DM is, like, one of my character's flaws. Well, I'd say it's not a flaw, but it's like the thing I do the most is that, I try and stick to my deals, and I try and negotiate everything with like a, bargain, something like, mercantile, like, here, I give you this, you give me that kind of thing. And when someone was going to go back on the deal, that's kind of like, hey, this is the way the world's supposed to work. What's going on here? So when the ghost argument with his son, I didn't bring up any mushy stuff about, how you're really following the son, you should try and resolve this. I was like, hey, look, Fallon Leafblade, you made a deal with me that if I brought your son back here, you would talk to him and then get the heck out of here. And it was like, and you told me it was cool with me bringing you here, and then you're going to talk to your father, not kick him around. So that was my argument. It was like, hey, we had an arrangement, and you're screwing with it right now by arguing. And none of this father mushy stuff or anything like that. So I mean, if I was a DM, would I have seen that and said, yeah, you should just get inspiration because that's your character. And you did that even if it wasn't the best argument to make. We had a deal. You signed this thing. We had a verbal agreement, and they're breaking it. So, yes, I mean, that's not what I would probably have said to an arguing ghost, but...
Right. Well, there's times that a player is going to role play, and because of what the character is, you're going to do things that might not be the best situation, and that really is an ideal opportunity for.
Yeah. So if I recognize those, that's what I tend to give it for. But
another good example is like to go along with actually, another video we did, which was turning your failures into success. If someone does a really good job with like role playing and creating a very bad situation for themselves, that's kind of like humorous or adds to the story, then I'd absolutely reward that failure with inspiration.
Right.
Depending on what exactly they do.
Right.
So there's definitely instances like that in the game that you can give inspiration for. Again, I feel like role-playing, essentially role-playing and creating cool, memorable scenes in the game, they're like my top two things that I would give inspiration for, if I remember.
So how do you handle it in your game? Do you remember to give inspiration, or are you kind of like this guy over here that you forget a lot? Put your stories and comments down below. While you're at it, like, share, even subscribe.
You can Patreonize us in a good way over on our Patreon account.
you can also check out the articles at nerdarchy.com.
So until next time, stay nerdy.